When you think about it, our bodies are kind of like a finely tuned orchestra, especially when it comes to reproduction. It's this incredible system of perfect timing with different parts all playing their role at just the right moment, led by, well, an invisible conductor. So, what is that conductor? What's the master signal making sure everything from sperm production to the monthly menstrual cycle happens with such amazing precision? Let's find out. Well, the answer is hormones, a super precise cascade of them. And here's the kicker. The whole show, for both men and women, kicks off in the exact same place, right up in the brain. This is our mission control. Yep, that's right. Tucked away deep in our brains, you've got the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Think of them as the absolute master regulators, the mission control for the entire reproductive system. They're the ones sending out the first commands for everybody. And it all kicks off with this really simple but super powerful two-step signal. The hypothalamus is kind of like the lookout. It monitors everything and sends a command down to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gets that command and then boom, it releases its own messenger hormones into your blood to get the process started. And this core process, it's the same for everyone once puberty begins. Okay, so that very first signal, it's a hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH for short. If we're sticking with our orchestra metaphor, this is literally the conductor tapping the baton. It's the signal that tells the pituitary gland, all right, get ready to play. So once that baton taps, the pituitary releases two major messenger hormones, follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. You'll hear them called FSH and LH all the time. Now, what's so cool here is that even though their names come from what they do in the female cycle, these two hormones are absolutely essential players in both sexes. It's just a fantastic example of biology being super efficient, right? Using the same tools for completely different jobs. All right, so let's dive in. First up, the male system. We're going to see how that universal signal from the brain creates a system that's all about one thing: steady, continuous production. So once LH and FSH make their way down to the testes, they each have very specific jobs. LH tells these things called Leydig cells to start producing testosterone. Meanwhile, FSH goes to work on the Sertoli cells, which is what directly fuels the creation of sperm, a process we call spermatogenesis. Now here's where things get really, really clever. And this is a huge difference from the female system we'll talk about in a bit. The male system isn't about cycles, it's built for consistency. And it does this with a brilliant feedback loop that keeps everything in a nice, steady state. I mean, how cool is this? As testosterone levels in the blood start to climb, the brain, our mission control, remember, it detects that change. And in response, the hypothalamus and pituitary just ease up on the gas. They release less GnRH, FSH, and LH. This, in turn, slows down testosterone production, so it never gets too high. It's a textbook negative feedback loop, and it keeps everything perfectly balanced. And get this, there's even a backup system. If the sperm count itself gets too high, the Sertoli cells release another hormone called inhibin. This sends a very specific message back to the brain. Hey, slow down the FSH, which, of course, slows down sperm creation. The bottom line here is that the system has multiple, super elegant checks and balances built right in. Okay, so we've seen the steady production model. Now, let's switch gears and look at the female system. And what's wild is that using the exact same starting signals from the brain, GnRH, FSH, and LH, the female body creates something totally different, a rhythmic, repeating cycle. And this rhythm, it's actually two separate cycles running at the same time, but they're perfectly in sync. You've got the ovarian cycle happening in the ovaries, which is all about getting an egg ready and releasing it. And at the same time, in the uterus, you've got the menstrual cycle, which is getting the uterine lining, the endometrium, all prepped for a potential pregnancy. So we all hear that number, right? 28 days. And yeah, that's the average. But it's really important to know that a totally normal, healthy cycle can be anywhere from 22 to 38 days. There's a really wide range of what's considered typical. All right, let's walk through the ovarian cycle step by step. It all starts with the follicular phase. This is where FSH tells the follicles in the ovary, hey, time to grow. And as these follicles grow, they start pumping out estrogen. Then, boom, around day 14, you get this massive spike of LH. That's the trigger for ovulation, the main event, when the most mature follicle releases an egg. After that, we're in the luteal phase. That empty follicle transforms into something called the corpus luteum, which is basically a temporary little hormone factory. And this is where you can really see the hormonal domino effect in action. It's just a beautiful chain reaction. FSH grows the follicles. The follicles make estrogen. That rising estrogen builds up the uterine lining, and it flips a switch in the brain that causes that massive LH surge. That LH surge is what triggers ovulation. And then the corpus luteum starts making progesterone, which keeps that uterine lining stable and basically tells the brain, hey, hold off on starting a new cycle for now. So what hits the reset button? Well, if a pregnancy doesn't happen, that little temporary hormone factory, the corpus luteum, starts to break down. When it does, progesterone levels just plummet. And that drop is the direct signal for menstruation to begin, shedding the uterine lining. It also takes the pause signal off the brain, letting the whole orchestra tune up for the next performance. But of course, this textbook cycle isn't set in stone. It doesn't stay the same forever, and it's not always perfectly on time. The whole hormonal system is incredibly dynamic, and it changes throughout a person's life. One of the biggest changes, of course, is menopause. What's happening here is that, over time, the ovaries just become less responsive to those FSH and LH signals from the brain. If they're not listening to the signals, follicles don't develop, ovulation stops, and eventually, menstrual periods stop too. And it's really important to stress this, cycle irregularity is super common. Our sources point out that especially in the first few years after puberty gets going, and again in the years leading up to menopause, that rhythm can be a lot less predictable. The body is just finding its new normal, its new balance. But sometimes the full story is even more complicated than that. This quote from one of the academic papers we looked at is a great reminder that just measuring hormone levels in the blood doesn't always tell you everything. You could have deeper issues, maybe with how the body's receptors are working, or the timing of the signals, that you wouldn't catch with just a simple blood test. Okay, so let's pull it all together. We've seen the steady, continuous production in one system, and this complex, rhythmic cycle in the other, and it all starts with the same hormonal toolkit from the brain. So why does understanding this intricate hormonal dance matter so much? Well, it matters because this hormonal cascade, it's basically the fundamental language of our reproductive health. It's not just about fertility. It influences our energy, our mood, our overall well-being. It is one of the most powerful and honestly most amazing examples of how deeply our brains and our bodies are connected. So, from a steady, self-regulating feedback loop to a complex, ever-changing monthly cycle, our hormonal orchestra creates a rhythm that is totally unique to each and every one of us. Which leaves us with a final thought. What can we learn about our own health, about our own bodies, if we just start listening a little more closely to that rhythm?